on a hot and sunny Thursday afternoon in Rocky River, Ohio, just outside of Cleveland. Welcome on into the Bullpen. I am your host, Adam the Bull, brought to you, of course, by Bet Rivers. There you see it. I'm going to point in the wrong direction. This way, this way. There we go. I still haven't learned. Up here? Nope. Over there. Oh. Brought to you by Bet Rivers. There you go. If you're not using the Bet Rivers app by now, what are you doing? I hit 2 parlays last week for you. Hopefully you took advantage of it. I hit a baseball parlay last Tuesday. I hit a Browns-Jags parlay over the weekend. I'll have another same-game parlay, Browns-Giants this weekend, that you can hopefully take advantage of on Bet Rivers. I will have my NFL picks. I went 3-2 this past week in our competition with the other hosts. I'm a game behind somebody. I can't remember who's ahead of me right now. So, been on a little bit of a roll. I'll also have another baseball parlay for you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody who's joining me. Whether you're joining me live or you're watching this later in the day. If you don't know by now, I am on live every Thursday at 2 p.m. I am on live every Sunday following the Browns game. And then I put out a Tuesday podcast. If you missed my show on Tuesday, I interviewed legendary sports talk show host Mike Francesa. He had some very interesting things to say, both about the city of Cleveland and the Cleveland Browns specifically. And if you missed it, make sure you go check it out on my YouTube page. If you missed it, it's probably because you haven't subscribed. Over 5,000 of you have subscribed, and I appreciate that very much. If you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button. It does not cost you a single penny. Coming up later in the show, the Guardians on the verge of clinching a playoff spot. Should they celebrate or wait till they win the division? Also, coming up later, will we see one of the Browns' draft picks get in a game for the first time this Sunday? But we begin with the injuries, and there are a lot of them. The Browns often last year had a very active injury report, and unfortunately that's been the case so far this year. Now, the quarterback hasn't been hurt. That's good news, coming off his best game of the season, which doesn't say much because his first game was terrible. But Deshaun Watson doing fine. A lot of other players are banged up. Now, I'll double-check this right now as we speak. But as of a few minutes ago, the injury report for today had not been out yet, and they put it out usually after practice. Let me look at the update, see if it's come out for today. So no, at this moment, no updated injury report. Did see some injuries around the league. T. Higgins is back at practice for the Bengals. Justin Herbert did not practice for the Chargers. And Jordan Love, shockingly, was supposed to miss a month, was practicing today for the Packers. In terms of the Browns heading into today, yesterday, the following Browns players did not practice. Myles Garrett, DeJuan Jones, David Njoku, Pierre Strong, and Jamari Thrash. More on many of those guys later. Limited, Charlie Hewlett, the long snapper, Zadarius Smith, Denzel Ward, Jedrick Wills, who's finally back on the field, and Alex Wright, all limited. Everybody else had a full practice, including Jack Conklin, which is very promising. The Browns have had their issues at left tackle with James Hudson. We assumed all offseason that Jedrick Wills would be the left tackle. There was no talk at any point in the offseason about Jedrick Wills missing the start of the season. There was no talk at all that I can remember of him missing any time in the preseason. He was supposed to be good to go, and yet we've just seen him get to the point where he's getting in a limited practice this week. I know my man G. Bush has a conspiracy theory that Jedrick Wills is not going to play till he's 100%. He's not going to play till week 5 because he doesn't want to come back off injury facing a big-time pass rusher. The two teams the Browns have played so far both had big-time pass rushers. The Giants have 2 of them. And then the Raiders, of course, have Max Crosby next week. And then the week after that, you've got Washington, and they don't. And they don't have a good team at all on defense. So whether that conspiracy theory is true or not, who knows? But the fact that Jack Conklin got a full practice in yesterday, and that Jedrick Wills at least got a limited practice in yesterday makes you think that there's a decent chance that at least one, if not both of them, will finally be ready to go here in week 3. Jedrick Wills has been out since the middle of last season. Jack Conklin was hurt opening day last year, so he's been out over a year at this point. I do believe that, well, not that I believe, it's obvious. Jack Conklin is ahead of Jedrick Wills in terms of recovery. He's been getting in limited practices since before the season at this point, so you'd think there's a good chance for Jack Conklin to play. The question is, if they're both ready to go, who's going to start at left tackle? And is it possible that we see Jedrick Wills at left tackle and Jack Conklin at right? Remember, as I mentioned, DeJuan Jones did not practice yesterday. We'll see if he practices today. Now, all reports are that DeJuan Jones is going to be able to give it a go. He's dealing with an injury. Offensive lineman generally tough, can play through injuries. So DeJuan Jones is expected to play as of now, but certainly things can change as the week goes along. And if Jed Wills and Jack Conklin are ready to go, who knows? But it would be, as much as those guys would help, at least one of them would at left tackle, it is risky putting a guy at left tackle, even though he's more talented than the guy currently playing left tackle, when he hasn't played, in Jed Wills' case, 10, 11 months. In Jack Conklin's case, over a year. And for Jack Conklin, who's, again, closer to being ready, it's also a situation where he hasn't played left tackle in a decade. So he'd be coming off injury for over a year, playing a position he's unfamiliar with. So there's risk in that. There's also risk in continuing to throw out James Hudson week after week when we know he is a subpar left tackle. In terms of Myles Garrett not practicing yesterday, he's dealing with a foot issue. Remember, at the Pro Bowl a couple of years ago, he hurt his foot. He seems to have one nagging injury almost every year. I'd be shocked if Myles Garrett doesn't play this week, but, when he's been hurt in the past and played through it, in many cases, he hasn't played his best football. So even if he does play, it's certainly worth keeping an eye on how much he might be limited. Speaking of limited, Denzel Ward was on a snap count, if you will, last week. Kevin Stefanski said he hopes to play him more this week. There was no report of that going on before. Now, that was smart. Often when coaches play games about who's going to play or not, I often think it's silly. But in this case, it was smart. You don't want to let the Jaguars know that Denzel Ward's only going to play 10 times on 10 plays because he's your best corner. And the Jags would account for that. And if they knew he was only going to play on a handful of plays, well, that would be an adjustment. So it was smart in that case for the Browns not to let the word get out on that. And as I said, Kevin Stefanski referenced it in his press conference yesterday and suggested that he'd like him to play more. But this is also something very much to keep an eye on during the game. You'll be paying attention to how much he's playing. The Giants really only have one guy that could be a special player on offense, and that's Malik Nabers, the rookie first-round pick. Played a magnificent game last week against Washington, although he did have a big drop. In fact, I was talking with Paul Schwartz, who covers the Giants for the New York Post. He's been covering them for 30 years. And he said that Nabers was accountable after the game, said he let down the veterans. You love to hear that from a young guy, that attitude of, it's on me. I hate when I see players blaming other people, whether it's on you or not. When a young player takes responsibility like that, that's a check mark in the good column, always, in my opinion. But Denzel Ward can handle any wide receiver, even one as young and talented as Malik Nabers, and more often than not will come out on top. And so it is a deal if he is limited this week. It's not. I'm not saying it's the end of the world, because the Giants don't really have any other threats. They have their other wide receivers are just guys. Their tight end's just a guy. Their running back's just a guy. There's nothing their quarterback's just a guy. I mean, like I said, on offense, Malik Neighbors is the only special player, and that's more of a guy you think is going to be special. He hasn't, proven it yet. One good game doesn't make you special, but a lot of people feel like he will be, and that was a good start for him last week. So certainly, along with JOK, who is on the injury report, but practiced in full yesterday, Denzel and Myles Garrett, those are the three most important players on this Browns defense. I would say Grant Delpit might be number 4. I thought Grant Delpit played real well last year and then struggled the second half of the season. I thought he got off to a good start. I thought he and JOK in particular played very well last week. They made a lot of impact plays, something we didn't see in the first week from this defense. I think the defense wants to really make a statement at home. They are not going to take the Giants lightly. I know the Giants are 0-2. We had, as I mentioned, Mike Francesa on Tuesday. He said, hey, I think the Giants are going to lose. They could end up being 0-5, 0-6. They're one of the worst teams in the league. That may all be true, but the Browns are in no position. First of all, it's the NFL. There are no Akrons or Miami of Ohio's in the NFL. Even the worst teams are not that bad. Not even close. Ohio State's favored by like 40 points this week against Marshall. The Browns are favored by 6.5 at home. I mean, if this game was a Giant Stadium, the Browns would be just a slight favorite. 6.5 is not a lot of points. A blowout in the NFL is double digits. A blowout in college is 40 points. It's a big difference here. The Browns don't play. If the Browns don't play well in this game, they could definitely lose to the Giants. Daniel Jones played better last week. He's not much of a thrower, but he's a good runner of the ball, and the Browns have struggled at times the last 2 years with mobile quarterbacks. So Browns can't mess around here. They got to come out. They got to play smarter. They've got to cut the penalties down. They've got to be better on third down. These are two major red flags in the first 2 weeks of the season. So we'll keep an eye on all these injured guys. In the end, I think the biggest concern is Myles Garrett, because if he doesn't play, that's a game changer. Myles Garrett is somebody that has to be double teamed, making things easier for everybody else on the D-line. If Myles Garrett does not play, and again, I'm not saying he's going to not play. In fact, I'll be surprised if he doesn't play. I don't think he's going to not play. I guess that made sense. But I think that Myles Garrett will play, but if he doesn't, it's huge, because now there's no need to double team anybody. And it's going to make things very tough on the rest of the defensive line, especially when Zadarius Smith and Alex Wright, at least on some level, are a little banged up themselves. Martin Emerson a little banged up as well. Denzel Ward certainly would be a big loss, but there's really no threat of Denzel Ward not playing, I don't think. He could be certainly limited in the game, as we've talked about. David Njoku is not going to play. We know that. Well, I guess we don't know that for sure. But it was expected he'd miss a couple of weeks. David Njoku is as tough as it gets. We know what he went through last year with that terrible burn he dealt with. So I don't question players' toughness very often, if ever. But certainly David Njoku would never going to question his toughness. This guy is unbelievable. But he's dealing with that ankle sprain, and I'd be very surprised if he did not, or if he played this week. Now, one other guy in the injury report who didn't practice yesterday is rookie wide receiver Jamari Thrash. Now, he didn't practice because he's sick, so I don't know what his status is. Again, I guess we'll see when the injury report comes out today. And since it's been 15 minutes, let me check again to see if it's come out here in the last 15 minutes. Okay. So no injury report yet. But Mary Kay Cabot says DeJuan Jones and Jamari Thrash back in practice today. So that's good. Pierre Strong not practicing. And most importantly, she just tweeted, Myles Garrett still not practicing, second straight day. Now, if Myles Garrett doesn't practice tomorrow, then you got to start to be concerned. Myles Garrett is so good that he could miss the full week of practice, especially this early in the season. And I think he'd be good to, if he's able to, he'll play. But now that he didn't practice today for the second straight day, there's a little more concern there. Again, we'll wait for the official injury report, and we'll see if he practices tomorrow. But the fact that he hasn't practiced 2 days in a row is definitely a lot more concerning than I initially thought. But I still think he's going to play. DeJuan Jones also got back on the field. I mentioned earlier that he was expected to play, so not a surprise he's practicing today. But I want to talk about Jamari Thrash. We know that one of the biggest weaknesses for the Browns in terms of player personnel has been their inability to draft quality wide receivers. They failed on Anthony Schwartz. They had a moment with Donovan Peoples-Jones. They appear to have failed on David Bell. I know he had a decent game last week before getting hurt. The start of Cedric Tillman's Browns career has not been particularly good. Well, the Browns this year drafted Jamari Thrash. Now, all these guys are mid to late round picks, to be fair. But the Browns drafted Jamari Thrash in the fifth round in this past draft. And we haven't seen him yet in the regular season. Showed some things in the preseason training camp. Thrash was active for the first game of the year in the loss to Dallas, but didn't play. Last week against Jacksonville, he was inactive. Now that he's back on the field, dealing with whatever illness he was dealing with, but the fact that he practiced today makes me think he's going to be okay, probably. I would expect Jamari Thrash to be active, and I wonder, with David Bell out of the mix, if we might see Jamari Thrash get a couple of plays on offense. I'm not saying he's going to get a ton of work. He might not get any work, but, David Bell and Cedric Tillman were getting reps on offense. With now Bell gone for the year, I think we could see Jamari Thrash get some opportunities. It might be 3 plays, might be 5 plays, I don't know. But it'll be another thing to keep an eye on for this Sunday's game is whether Jamari Thrash gets into the game. First of all, we'll find out at 11:30-ish if he's even active. But after that, we will find out if he gets any action at all. My man Z asks, thoughts on the Bryce Young situation. If you're the Dolphins, do you try to make a deal for him? The Bryce Young situation's a total disaster. It was probably right now it looks like definitely the wrong pick. If I'm Carolina, now they're a poorly run organization with a bad owner. I don't know how you give up on a guy this quickly. He's played 1 year and 2 games with as little talent around him as any quarterback can have. When they first benched him for Andy Dalton, I was ripping the Panthers, and I was talking with, who was I talking with? I can't remember now. I don't know. I can't remember if it was Dustin or maybe Tyvis, somebody. And they made the point that he's so out of sorts that he needs a breather. If I'm the Dolphins, I absolutely do not trade for him. I think the Panthers would be very stupid to trade him. You just invested so much in this guy in terms of draft capital. To give up on him this quick, you look like a fool. Now, we've seen it, right? Arizona gave up on Josh Rosen after 1 year was the right call. He wasn't the first overall pick in the draft. He was the 10th pick, I think, or the 8th. I can't even remember now. But to give up on the first pick of the draft that you traded extra picks for after a year and 2 games seems pretty crazy. So I don't think the Dolphins will try to trade for him. I don't think they should. Right now, he's a mess, playing with no confidence. Now, obviously, in Miami, he'd have better talent around him, but he's a second-year player who's in over his head right now. Now he's got to learn a new system, and then you're going to throw him in. Tua is supposed to come back. He's not retiring. By the time Bryce Young would really be ready, I think Tua will be back by that point. So, no, I would not do that. The the Panthers have botched the whole thing, but I've been talked into it being the right call to bench him right now, but they've got to give him another opportunity at some point. Problem is they are still lacking talent in a big-time way in Carolina, and part of the reason is because of all the draft picks they gave up to get him. Chris says, is Ward on the play count this week? Chris, we don't know. I would say probably. Kevin Stefanski said he hopes to get him out there for more than 11 plays. I mean, it's his decision. He doesn't have to hope. But the way he said it made me think he'll probably be on some sort of count this year and is just trying to be cagey about it as to not give the Giants any thoughts on that. I bet he'll play more than he played last week, but my guess is he doesn't play the full complement of snaps that he would play on a normal game day. Chris asks, does Mrs. Bull watch football with you? She does not. My wife has no interest whatsoever in football. She doesn't really like sports at all. She'll watch baseball with me sometimes. She likes going to baseball games. So really baseball's the only sport she'll watch. She does not like football at all. She doesn't get it. She didn't grow up watching it. So she is out. She's out on football. All right. Before we say goodbye for the day, I wanted to talk about the Guardians. Great win by the Guardians yesterday. And it was really good to see. And right now the Guardians are playing. I'll update you as we go. Right now they're in the top of the fifth. Joey Cantillo, who has been absolutely lights out in his 2 starts. I know somebody recently asked me, is there a chance he could start in the playoffs? I mean, the way he's pitched lately is a possibility. He has allowed 2 base runners here in the 5th inning, but 2 straight lights-out starts so far today against Minnesota. 4 1/3, 2 hits, no runs, 3 walks, 6 strikeouts. He's at 85 pitches, so I'm guessing if he gets through the 5th, it'll be his last inning. Like I said, the Guardians scored on a Kyle Manzardo home run in the bottom of the 1st inning, and it's 2 on, 1 out. I don't have the game on in front of me. I'm looking at the game center or whatever they call it on ESPN. But last night, great win for the Guardians. They were down 1-0. Josh Naylor hits his 30th home run to tie it. They were down 2-1. Josh Naylor hits his 31st home run to tie it. They were down 4-2 in the 10th. They scored 3 in the bottom of the 10th. Kyle Manzardo has done a nice job since coming back to the big leagues. I mentioned his home run this afternoon in the 1st inning. Manzardo comes through with the RBI single. And then Brian Rocchio with 2 on and 1 out in a tie game, 4-4, bottom 10. Rocchio, soft line drive into right field. He's been good, as you heard on the broadcast maybe yesterday, in those late close situations. He's done a really nice job. And the Twins, unfortunately, just took the lead as Manny Margot just ripped a double. So I was about to say if the Guardians win today, which they so very well might, they're only down 2-1 in the 5th inning. If they win today, they clinch a playoff spot. Their magic number for clinching the American League Central is 5. So any combination of 5 Guardians wins and Royals losses will give the Guardians the AL Central. It's really just a matter of time. I would be beyond stunned if the Guardians did not win the Central. A 6-game lead with 9 to play. They can't end up tied, but 6-game lead with 9 to play right now. They are a game and a half behind the Yankees for the top spot in the American League. The Yankees have the tiebreaker, so the Yankees are in good shape to be the 1 seed. Guardians probably 2. The Guardians are 5.5 ahead of Houston for the 2nd seed and the 2nd bye, so they're in good shape there. Although remember, last 3 games of the year, Houston and Cleveland in Cleveland. So if the Astros are within 3 games, they'll have a chance. The very interesting story in the American League is the wild card. Baltimore's the top wild card. You have Kansas City at 82-71 as the 2nd wild card. You have Minnesota at 80-72 as the 3rd wild card. Detroit just a half game back of Minnesota at 80-73. Mariners still alive. So are Boston, Tampa, Texas, and Toronto. Those teams are not getting there. You're going to have 3 American League Central teams in the playoffs. You're going to have 4 American League Central teams over 500, things we haven't seen in a long time. I said a couple days ago, the Royals are going to hold on to the 2 seed, and the Tigers are going to get the 3. I stand by that. Tigers have won 4 in a row, 8 of 10, one of the hottest teams in baseball. I think they have the second best record in the last month. Great pitching. Skubal got another win for them yesterday against Kansas City. So if the season ended today, it would still be Minnesota. But I think the Tigers end up grabbing that last spot. All right, thanks, everybody, as always, for joining me. Go Guards, Chris. Yes, go Guards. Thanks to Z. Thanks to Max for producing, as always. And thanks to all of you for watching, listening, subscribing. Again, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. I'll next be on Sunday, soon after, probably about 15 minutes, 20 minutes after the Browns and Giants comes to an end. I'll jump on the air live this Sunday, so I don't know, somewhere around 4:30-ish, give or take. So make sure you join me for a live reaction, win or lose, to whatever happens with the Browns and the Giants. Couldn't think of the Giants for a second. I'm going to take one last look before we go, see if there's been any further updated injury news, and then we're going to say goodbye. The big news again, according to Mary Kay Cabot, Myles Garrett did not practice for a second straight day. And Jed Wills did practice. Jamari Thrash back. DeJuan Jones back. Myles Garrett remains out. Pierre Strong remains out. We'll have more on the injury report later. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. We'll talk to you next time. Where else but right here in the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by Bet Rivers. See you, everybody.